Everyone checking in on the market. We're going to look at SPY. We're going to look at the Dow finally. I don't generally look at the Dow because I don't like how much weight individual stocks have in that index, but we're going to look at it. IWM QQQ XLF and the volatility index. Going to save the commodities for the commodity video likely tomorrow. But we have indecision on the weekly time frame right at key weekly resistance on a lot of these charts. So indecision after a massive bull move favors the bears, but it's also the standpoint where we have to have the bears prove it to us. So like always, it's just the daily uptrend. So this is a potential bearish reversal doji at the top of this bull move, but I have to see it break the daily uptrend before it means anything. And we saw weakness today on the gap up open. We filled the gap. The bulls bought the dip. And looking at the 15-minute time frame, it was just a V-shaped recovery kind of day. Hard pullback, slow and steady recovery. And in the end, it ended up with the S&P 500 seeing the second highest, actually no, the highest close on this entire bull move. So we're still watching the top 281.31 as resistance, which we did reject from today. Our new daily higher low level has shifted from 276.35 up to 277.48. Reason for that is we pulled back for 2 days. Then we saw bullish follow through heading up towards resistance. So that's our new higher low. And this is the range to be watching into next week. We've been within this range for the last 6 days in a row. And we should see a break sometime in the next couple of days. RSI is still just grinding this 70 level, clearly struggling. There's clearly a battle going on. And you see this constant, Kudlow or whoever putting out these tweets saying, we're really close to a deal with China. And it's pretty astounding that, we keep seeing the same news milked and it's still working. We have to keep in mind that the powers that be and the people in charge want to see the stock market go up. They're doing everything they can to make that happen. And that has to do with kicking the can down the road and dangling this carrot of a potential China trade deal. So all about the daily time frame as always. Checking the Dow here, the weekly time frame is very similar. 86.69 and 86.64 are our weekly resistances, and we topped out at 86.67. So clearly we're struggling. It's the first red candlestick on the weekly time frame. Also remember that pattern we're watching. Every single week is a higher low compared to the week before it. That's now 10 weeks in a row that has taken place. We're watching for that pattern to break, indicating weekly consolidation is coming when it does break, but it hasn't broken yet. So the daily time frame for the Dow, a significant pullback week. We consolidated all week, but as far as the higher low goes, 849 is that level, and it's still holding. This is a very brief little consolidation period before continuation that we saw. Next level is down at 84.09, but it's still holding. So we're going to have to break that clear base of support. If we look at that on the 4-hour time frame, look how many times it's touched here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'd have to see a clear bear break for any kind of traction. If we get that break, we look to weekly consolidation, same as most other markets we're looking at. IWM has broken its weekly resistances more clearly, but same kind of indecision candlestick, slowing down a little bit. The daily time frame, we have the higher low still maintained, resistance 159.50, and we're in the middle of that range with the bulls in some slight favor. So maintaining in the daily higher low pattern, and that double low of support, we were watching the potential of the inverse, or not the inverse, the regular old head and shoulders pattern. This move up today is making that less likely, but it's still very clear that 156.06 and 156.12 are the most important support levels in the short term to keep the daily higher low pattern. QQQ, weekly time frame closed pretty strong. So we did not get that consolidation for the entire week like we saw on the Dow. And on QQQ, we're right at the top. It is a double top, but we're right there. 174.66, 174.65. Daily higher low is 171.76, and the bulls are going to try and see continuation first thing this coming week. Have to break that support level to lose the daily uptrend, but the bulls closer to resistance than both SPY and IWM at this point. XLF, financial sector bulls still in control. The weekly resistances here, we're further away from them, 27.47 and 27.52. Still haven't made our way to those weekly resistances, so that's a bit of a difference between it and these other markets we just looked at, but the daily time frame is still strong. And although we saw a bearish candlestick today with a bunch of profit taking, just like the last move we saw to a higher high with no follow through into consolidation, higher high so far no follow through, but it's also the only name that saw that higher high today. So the base of support here is 26.36, and we negated the head and shoulders pattern on the 4-hour by seeing continuation. But it's, again, That base of support is still a very important level, regardless of where we stand compared to it, and watching for the potential of a day of pullback because it's a very similar candlestick to what we saw to start off the week. But daily uptrend still intact so far for everybody. So looking at the volatility index, we are seeing weakness. We have now seen every single week. I take that back. So the difference here, we've seen every single week on the markets with higher lows. We have not seen that with VIX. We had a little double top the last 2 weeks, 16.16 and 16.17. We look at the daily chart and we are right back down to the lows, not seeing that daily higher low form that the bulls needed to try and change this trend. So all in all, it's just another lower high at 16.17, and we are looking down at potential lower lows. The weekly time frame to look for the price range we were in here, traded sideways back all summer between the $10 and $14 range, essentially $15 range, and here we are making our way back into this range. So overall, let's look back at the previous significant spike in the volatility index and then slow and steady pullback. This one had more bounces within it, not just a straight drop like we've seen over the last 10 weeks. But you can see the shift in momentum and the trend change really came out of nowhere. It was just this one big spike up when we saw that initial move from 1122 up to 1961. Obviously a huge move, well over 50%. But you look at it on the weekly time frame and there were no real clues that we were going to see it. It just happened out of nowhere. So checking back in on the daily time frame for June and July, and this is when I just look back and see historically, what were clues on similar scenarios that had things stand out, and you can see it just came out of nowhere. So that's the way the volatility index works, and it takes a lot of patience for the bulls to wait in this kind of scenario, because anybody trying to get any of these bull moves on the way down has probably been giving away money. And like I said in recent videos, in my opinion, when we do see this daily trend change and we break these lower highs, it's going to come out of nowhere and very quickly. It's not going to be the kind of slow trend change that we see in stocks or other instruments that allow us, time to get into. And that's why this instrument is so high risk, high reward, especially the 3 times leveraged ETFs based off of it. It's because it's really tricky and it's really, lucrative when it goes right, but when it doesn't, it's just a slow bleed back down. So we're continuing watching. I'm continuing cautious in this market. What I am most interested in is what is the marijuana sector going to do when we see weekly consolidation in the S&P 500. That's going to be notable for me. We're going to be watching for higher lows to form on all these weekly charts because obviously we've seen such significant bullish momentum. I do still have a small initial starter hedge position while we're trading within this range, and if we get another clear leg up on the S&P 500, I will exit that, and then from that point on, I would just wait for the daily higher low pattern to dictate any entries. So this is my 3rd attempt on the way up with a break-even stop, a small loss stop, and right now I'm slightly in the red. Again, they're just starter positions, so they're very small, and they are insignificant, and they're a hedge, so the fact that they're still going up means that what I am hedging against in terms of longer term portfolio of my parents is doing well. So that's a good thing. So I hope you have a good weekend. We'll continue to check back in. Going to start doing a road trip series here in terms of the end of the video content. And we will start that off now. We'll wrap it up here with story time. I'm going to kick it off with a road trip that I went on. And just to set the stage, before we get into it, let's see, at this point in time, I started off with my road tripping career when I was in college, and I watched the movie, oh man, what's it called? Into the Wild. So I watched Into the Wild, and as soon as I saw it, I said, all right, we're going to Yellowstone. I'm trying to adventure. And so with my college buddies, we drove to Yellowstone 36 hours straight to the Badlands in South Dakota and then to the Yellowstone, and we went out into the bush for 10 days backcountry camping. We had no idea what we were doing in terms of supplies to bring, and we were starved without food out in the backcountry. It was a huge learning experience, and we had such insufficient gear. It was comical looking back upon it, but we were pretty miserable and hungry, sustaining ourselves with ramen noodles after hiking 10 miles a day for 100 miles. So that was fun. After that, I went on a road trip with my buddies after graduating college. I took 2 of them, and we were going around the country to all the national parks. found out about 2 weeks before the trip that neither of them had ever been camping. So I was pretty much the leader of that excursion and did all the planning and all the driving, and we took my Honda Civic out there. And after that, I had a great experience with them. It was a ton of fun, but there were a lot of times where I was sitting there saying, man, I wish I were by myself, because I would wake up early. You know, I'd be up with the sun and they'd sleep 2 or 3 hours after that. So I'd have to just be bumming around the campsite waiting for them, when in reality, I wanted to be up and going and on with my day. So definitely appreciated the camaraderie and company and fun that we had, but I wanted to do my own. So I set out on my own many-month road trip around the country in my Honda Civic, living out of my car. And I was also doing it on a budget. So I'm a minimalist at heart my whole life. I always have been conservative with money, conservative with resources. And so I had a game plan of, I'm just going to try and live out of my car and do this adventure with as much money as I'd be spending on rent. And I had saved up at that point in my trading career. I had success in the US marijuana penny stock market, and I had saved up enough, maybe $20,000, that I was comfortable to know that I could, travel around for a year and figure some things out and have some fun before I looked at the job world and looked at, making money. And at that point, I didn't think I was going to be a full-time trader my whole life. I hadn't gotten to that point. I had some successful swing trading, and I traded a little bit while I was on my road trip by myself. Not a whole lot, but just some swing trades. There would be times where I wouldn't have internet for a whole week, so I would do some swing trading. And there were times where I would be, put in one place for a couple weeks visiting a friend or something, and that would allow me to do some trading as well. But overall, I was slowing way down on trading and just looking to do some adventuring. So started it off in, let's go with, that's what my life was. That was everything that I owned that I would put in my car, and had all the essentials. I had a big tent that I grew up with. This was like a 6-person party tent. I had a 4-person tent that I would bust out when I was camping out of my car. And then I had a 1-person tent that was really light for when I was backcountry camping. I had all my rain gear, and this was my sleeping mat, which, part of being a minimalist, I made tons of mistakes in terms of, skimping on my gear. This army pad is like $8. It's this thick. You might as well be sleeping on the ground. It did nothing. And I said, all right, now I need to buy a $100 sleeping mat after this experience, because I was just miserable and it wasn't worth it. There are some things that money is worth being spent on, and a sleeping mat is definitely one of them. So that was another lesson that I learned. So that was what I left with in my car. Didn't have much else room, and because the Honda Civic's very small, it was completely filled up. I started on the East Coast in North Carolina in the Smoky Mountains, pretty close to where I'm living right now. And that's why they call them the Smoky Mountains, because the elevation has the clouds rolling right through them. And it's an awesome national park. And I got to learn a lot about these national parks in terms of their, rules and regulations. Some of them, like Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, is extremely friendly to campers. You get a permit, and it pretty much says, don't camp within 100 feet of a road, 100 feet of a trail. And other than that, you can go wherever you want and sleep wherever you want. And I like that, because there's so many times where I'm hiking and I'm just walking by a spot and I'm like, oh, that's the spot. I want to camp there. And oftentimes, it's not where your permit designates that you're supposed to go, or things like that. So in Smoky Mountain, it's not the best camping. They have one designated campsite for developed camping, and it gets really crowded with a ton of people. And other than that, there's a lot of surrounding areas of national forests, and national forests are a lot more liberal with their rules, and you can pretty much pull off and backcountry camp wherever. There's very little regulation in that regard. So I generally would do that, and then, go and hike inside the park, but not really camping in the park. But in this instance, I was. So night 1 of the road trip, setting off on this excursion, and I was heading out to my campsite a little bit late in the afternoon, and close to the evening, actually. I was in a bit of a hurry. So got into the trail, started hiking. I think I had maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles to get to my campsite. Got about a third of the way there, and it just started downpouring. And, I had some rain gear, but this is the kind of downpour that no matter what, everything's going to be soaked, and you're going to have to set up your tent, and your tent's going to be soaked, and your sleeping bag's going to be soaked. And so I just turned around and walked back to my car, took off all my clothes, got naked in my car, and just sat there for a while and started to have the doubts, what am I doing? Is this, I'm about to do this for a couple months. Can I even do this? Just, all those negative thoughts that just started building, and certainly on the back of having my night number one completely ruined in terms of what I was planning on, and it being pretty much, one of the worst case scenarios of comfortability for that night. So with all that doubt, honestly, I took a hit of ganja and I put on some music, and I've never experienced a more significant, impactful 180-degree turnaround of emotions. Generally, fortunately, I don't really have those negative feelings. I have a very happy life that I'm very grateful for, but in this instance, it was just like, whoa, I can't wait. This is so exciting. Everything is perfect. I couldn't be happier. And that I will always remember for how notable the complete turnaround in mental state was with just those two little combinations. And I think it was either listening to Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix when it happened as well. Very notable. I wrote that down somewhere. I also took notes and dream journal. That's another thing. With the part of this trip that I was doing, a big goal I had was learning lucid dreaming. And I was already lucid dreaming at that point, but I just mean getting really good at it and reading about it. So I brought multiple books with me, and I was keeping dream journals, and I was adjusting my sleep schedule to wake up really early in the morning and then go do something and break up my sleep cycle and then go back to sleep for an hour or two. And that's when you have the best lucid dreams. And I actually just had a lucid dream when I was napping an hour ago before making this video. But that was a good start. So I camped in the Smoky Mountain National Park for a couple nights after regaining my composure. And I've gone there in the summer and the winter, maybe 3 or 4 times total. And I've never gone there without seeing elk. So there's elk all over, and they're just hanging out. They're used to people, very accustomed to it. And some nice fungi. What a lot of people don't know is that in Western North Carolina, it's a temperate rainforest. So it's extremely lush. They get a lot of water that, supplements all these plants. And there's tons of plant life. I want to say there's some kind of statistic like the most diverse plant life in the continental United States. I might be making that up, but it's something along those lines in terms of the variety of plant life. And if you've been to Western North Carolina in the summer, it blows you away with how lush everything is. And it does seem like a jungle. So here are some fungi getting all up on a tree. And one of my favorite parts about road tripping is water. Drinking, fresh sources. And this is a really easy filter that you just scoop up the water and hang it. And within 5 minutes, you have a gallon filled up of fresh mountain creek water. And obviously, the closer to the source, the closer into the top of the mountains you get it, the better it's going to be in terms of cleanliness. But that was something that I really started to appreciate, just fresh, clean water directly from the source, and that helped me feel really connected. So this entire road trip, we're going to go through all the states and all the national parks, and I took a bunch of pictures, not much video. But this entire road trip, in my opinion, shaped a lot of my psychology and personal everything about me that makes me a good trader. So I do think there are contributions to that. A lot of comfortability being alone. And it's almost to the point now where, I need space to be alone because I enjoy it so much. But that was definitely due to this road trip and so many months on the road being alone. And there were times where I would go, a couple weeks without having any interaction with people aside from, just in passing hellos. So let's see what else. Syncing up with the sun. So my entire rhythm changed with the sun, where I was waking up with the sun and going to sleep. If you're by yourself and it's nighttime and pitch black and you're out in the middle of the woods, there's not a whole lot to do. So I would generally go to sleep right as the sun was going down. So that would at times be, 8 o'clock, I'm asleep, and I'm awake at a little after 5:30, just as the sky starts changing colors to get sunrise. And I loved that schedule. It felt really on point. Aside and drinking water from the source and waking up with the sun, I felt very connected to the land. And with all the hikes that I ended up doing, it was a wonderful experience that I will continue to share with you all. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you in tomorrow's video, and we'll take it from there. Do good things. Have a great Friday night. Gonna go see some Empire Strikes Brass funk, New Orleans style.